Imagine a building with only one public exit. An exit so narrow that every person who leaves is funneled past a single, unblinking security camera. It is a Friday night in Columbus, Ohio. The air is thick with the scent of beer. The floor is sticky with spilled drinks, and the room is packed with the chaotic rhythmic thrum of hundreds of people moving through the space. At exactly 1:55 a.m., a young man named Brian Shaffer appears on the monitor. He is captured walking toward the entrance of the Ugly Tuna Saloona. He stops to chat with two women. He looks tired, he looks present, and then, with a casual turn of his heels, he walks back into the bar. That is the last time any human eye, or any electronic eye, would ever see him. He did not walk out the front door. He did not sneak out the back. He did not crawl through the ventilation shafts or collapse in a bathroom stall. Brian Shaffer, a 27-year-old medical student, effectively dissolved into the architecture of the building. He is still technically inside that bar, according to the laws of logic and the evidence of the surveillance footage. Yet he has been missing for 18 years. This is not a magic trick. This is a glitch in the reality we believe we understand. A locked room mystery where the room is a public space and the door never opened for the man who was meant to walk through it. To understand why Brian's disappearance remains the gold standard for impossible crimes, we have to look past the mystery and into the man. Brian was not a drifter. He was a student at Ohio State University, working toward a medical degree that required a level of focus and endurance that few possess. He was charismatic, athletic, and deeply in love with his girlfriend, Alexis. By all accounts, his life was on an upward trajectory. But in the weeks leading up to that April night, Brian's world had been hollowed out. His mother, Renee, had passed away from cancer. Grief has a way of altering the landscape of a person's mind, and for Brian that landscape had become a dark, uncharted territory. He was planning a trip to Miami with Alexis, a trip where he intended to propose. He had a ring, a future, and a plan. But we have to ask ourselves, as we look into the faces of the people we think we know, when the world falls apart, do we look for a way to fix it? Or do we look for a way to leave it behind? The night of April 1st, 2006, began with an uneasy normalcy. Brian met his father, Randy, for dinner. It was a simple, quiet meal, but Randy would later reflect on the fatigue in his son's eyes. It was the exhaustion of a student carrying the weight of a dying parent's memory. After dinner, Brian met up with his friend, William Florence. They spent the next few hours moving through the short North District of Columbus, a nightlife hub where the bass of the music rattles the windows and the streets are crowded with students, eager to burn off the stress of the week. They moved from bar to bar, a typical bar crawl that thousands of students were participating in that same night. By 1:15 a.m., they found themselves at the Ugly Tuna Saloona. It was a place designed for excess, a second-story sanctuary of neon lights and loud music. The escalator leading up to the entrance acted as a sort of umbilical cord for the bar, pulling people in and eventually pushing them out into the night. At 1:50 a.m., the footage catches Brian at the top of that escalator. He is leaning against a railing, talking to two young women. He looks tired. He looks maybe a little buzzed from the drinks, but he looks like Brian Shaffer. He turns, he laughs, he says his goodbyes, and he walks back inside the doors. That is the moment the timeline fractures. William Florence waited for him. He assumed Brian had just moved to a different part of the bar, maybe met up with some other friends, or got caught in a conversation in a corner booth. He waited, The lights came on at 2 a.m., the signal for the end of the night. The crowd began to surge toward the exit. It was a slow, steady stream of bodies, 100 people flowing down the escalator, each face captured by the camera at the top. William watched them. He watched for the face he knew. He watched for the way Brian walked. But the stream dried up, the bar emptied, and Brian Shaffer was not among them. When Brian failed to show up for his flight to Miami on that following Monday, the panic moved from the private sphere of his family into the cold, clinical hands of the Columbus Police Department. They didn't just search for a missing person. They searched for a technical error in the fabric of the building. They requested every second of security footage from every camera in the vicinity. They painstakingly went through the tapes, frame by agonizing frame, marking every person who entered and every person who exited. They created a master list of human movement for that building. Every single soul who walked into the Ugly Tuna Saloona that night was checked off the list when they walked out. Everyone, that is, except for Brian. It was as if the building itself had developed a taste for his presence and refused to let go. The investigators searched the Ugly Tuna with a level of rigor that borders on the obsessive. They tore out the ceiling tiles, searching for a space where a body might be hidden in the crawl space. They emptied the walk-in freezers, moved crates in the storage rooms, and brought in cadaver dogs to sniff for the scent of death in the carpets and the concrete. The dogs did something that would haunt the case for years. They picked up Brian's scent at the bar area, and then, in the middle of the floor, the scent simply vanished. It was a clean break. The dogs didn't lead to a window. They didn't lead to the escalator. They didn't lead to the bathroom. They just stopped, looking around in confusion, as if the human they were tracking had been plucked out of the air. There was a construction site adjacent to the bar, and the police turned their attention to the service door that led to it. It was the only other possible exit, a dark, dusty tunnel of unfinished business. But the site was a mess of debris, thick with construction dust that would have recorded a footprint, with the clarity of an ink pad. Investigators checked that dust. It was undisturbed. It was smooth, silent, and empty. Brian hadn't walked through it. If he had, the police would have seen his path in the dirt, and the dogs would have caught the trail. Instead, they found nothing but the quiet hum of an unfinished room. As the weeks bled into months, the case took on a quality of the paranormal, even though the police remained stubbornly grounded in the practical. The family, desperate for any sign that Brian was still out there, turned to the only link they had left, his cell phone. Alexis, his girlfriend, made it a ritual. Every night, she would call his number, listening to the monotonous, heart-sinking cycle of the voicemail. It was a way to keep him present in a world that was moving on without him. Then in September, the ritual broke. She called, and instead of the immediate jump to voicemail, the phone rang. It rang once, then twice, then 3 times, a rhythmic, mechanical heartbeat in the silence of a bedroom. She didn't speak. Her breath caught in her throat. When it finally clicked to voicemail, the mystery only deepened. The signal was traced to a tower in Hilliard, miles away from the bar. It was a ghost ping, a digital whisper that led police to an empty field. There was no phone, no tower, no person, just the echoing suggestion that Brian was somewhere out there, lurking in the periphery of a network that was failing to hold him. The memorial website became another graveyard of secrets, a message appeared one day in the guest book. "I know where he is." It was a phrase that could stop a heart. The message was tracked to a library computer, a terminal that saw hundreds of people every day. By the time they reached the library, the logs were cold, and the person who typed those words had vanished into the same mist that claimed Brian. Was it a cruel game played by a stranger who enjoyed the pain of the morning? Or was it the one chance at the truth that slipped through the fingers of the law? We will likely never know. The theories that surround Brian Shaffer's disappearance are as varied as they are unsettling. The most common theory, the one that the police often lean toward despite the lack of evidence, was that Brian had chosen to disappear. The death of his mother, the pressure of medical school, the crushing weight of expectation. Could he have used that chaotic Friday night to slip out through an exit no one thought to watch, discard his clothes and start a new life? He loved the Virgin Islands, and some speculate he made it there, living out the rest of his days under a name he chose for himself, far from the halls of OSU and the memory of the woman he couldn't save. It is a romantic theory, in a grim sort of way. It implies he had agency. It implies he is alive. But it ignores the man he was, the man who was planning a proposal, the man who was building a future. Would a man who loved his father so dearly leave him to spend his life searching for a son who was merely hiding? Then there is the darker, more visceral possibility of foul play. The Ugly Tuna was a crowded place, and in the crush of students, things can happen that never leave the room. Could he have been targeted? Could he have been removed in a way that defied the cameras? Perhaps hidden inside a piece of equipment, or walked out by someone who knew exactly where the blind spots were. Someone who knew how to navigate the geometry of the bar, so that Brian was always behind the shoulder of a camera's view. It is a chilling thought, because it implies that the perfect crime is not one that leaves no evidence. It is one that leaves no room for the truth to be found. And then there are the more fringe, disturbing theories, like the Smiley Face Killers. It is a concept that has floated around true crime communities for years. The idea of a network of individuals who target young, athletic men, leaving behind a signature of a smiley face in the area of the crime. It is a theory that draws connections across state lines, a web of disappearances that seem impossible on their own but horrifying in aggregate. Whether or not Brian was a victim of something so organized, the fact that such a theory exists speaks to the primal human need to find a reason for the unreasonable. We cannot handle the idea that a person can simply blink out of existence. We need a villain. We need a plot. We need a motive, even if it is a sick one. As we reach the 18-year mark, the Ugly Tuna Saloona has been demolished and renovated. The physical space that held the mystery of April 1st, 2006 is gone, replaced by new floors, new walls, and new lives that have no memory of the man who vanished there. But the mystery is not a physical object. It is an intellectual weight. Brian Shaffer is still there, in the digital archives, in the grainy, flickering frames of a camera that saw everyone but him. He is the ghost in the machine, a testament to the idea that our reality is far more porous than we like to believe. We trust in our walls, we trust in our cameras, we trust in the sequence of our days. But every once in a while, the universe reminds us how easily we can be erased. The case remains open, an eternal question mark in the annals of Ohio crime. His father, Randy, passed away in 2008, a tragic irony in a life already filled with them. He spent the last 2 years of his life looking for a son who left no footprint, searching for a ghost in a field that had nothing to give him. He died without the answer, without the closure of a gravesite or a goodbye. And that, perhaps, is the most harrowing part of the story. The disappearances that leave a body are tragedies, but the disappearances that leave a mystery are wounds that never close. They are the stories we tell to remind ourselves that the world is a dark place, and that sometimes the light doesn't reach into the corners where people go missing. We may never know what happened to Brian, but we will always know the man he was, and the hole he left in the world when he simply stopped being there. The mystery of the ugly tuna is the mystery of us all. The thin, precarious line between being here and being gone. And the terrifying realization that sometimes the distance between the two is no further than the turn of a head and a walk into the dark. If you have a theory, if you have a memory, if you have a thought on where Brian might be, share it. Keep the story alive, because the only thing worse than a tragedy is a forgotten one. Brian Shaffer is not forgotten, and until we have the truth, he will remain the man who erased himself, the ghost in the machine, and the eternal question in the heart of Columbus. We are all still waiting for the escalator to descend. We are all still waiting for the man to walk out of the bar, and until he does, the mystery lives on, echoing in the halls of a memory that refuses to let him go. The night is long, the questions are endless, and the truth is still hiding in the blind spot, waiting to be seen.